colonial agrarian policies. The dual system of governance stated by the British in Bengal aimed at increasing the revenue for the company and buy fine cotton and silk cloth at cheap rates with that revenue. The urge to maximize revenue directly led to the infamous Bengal famine of 1770, in which one-third of the population of Bengal perished and agriculture was abandoned in many parts of Bengal. So the EEIC embarked on a systematic approach to land revenue collection with a view to collecting the maximum amount of revenue in a timely and predictable manner. The EEIC introduced three main types of land revenue settlements in India. The permanent settlement covered Bengal, Bihar, Odisha, and the Benares division of UP, accounting for 19% of the British territories. The Ryotwari settlement covering Bombay and Madras presidencies, accounting for 51% of the company's territories. The Mehalbari settlement accounted for 30% of the company's territories, covering United Provinces, large parts of modern-day Uttar Pradesh, central provinces, and Punjab. Commercialization of agriculture and cultivation. The term commercialization means production of something for sale in the market. Commercialization of agriculture simply means that a peasant grows more than he and his family can consume and he sells the rest in the market. It usually happens in an economy where the land revenue demand is in cash and not as a part of the produce. In India, after the various land revenue settlements were put in place, the commercialization of agriculture took place. All the three land revenue settlements that we read about earlier were based on cash payment, so the zamindar, lambardar or the ryot had to make enough provision for cash by selling a part of the produce in the market to be able to pay cash revenue. Secondly, as a direct result of the land revenue settlements, there was also a rapid commercialization of land. This means that the right to own land did not depend on birthright or any other traditional right, but on the ability to pay revenue on time. In cash of default, the land would be put up for auction. This was a fundamental change in the previous land systems that existed in India, leading to much disruption in rural societies. The third change was brought about in the rural areas by the forced cultivation of some commercial crops, sometimes referred to as plantation crops. Peasants were forced to cultivate high-value commercial crops. These crops were not needed locally and were meant only for export. In the first phase of the colonial rule, opium and indigo were the main commercial crops. Opium was cultivated in western India and exported to China in exchange of Chinese tea. Indigo was cultivated mainly in the Bengal province and exported to Britain and Europe, helping the company make huge profits. America was the only other country that produced indigo in large quantity. However, after America became independent in 1776, supplies to Britain stopped. So the company turned to its newly occupied colony of Bengal to ensure supplies of indigo. From the middle of the 19th century, however, the demand for new types of commercial crops rose. Jute, cotton and rubber were now needed from India to meet the needs of the Industrial Revolution in England. There were two important results of cultivation of commercial crops on peasants. First, since these were sold in international markets, their demand fluctuated widely. While in the good years, it benefited the peasants to some extent. In the bad years, the peasants suffered very badly. In the absence of cash from cash crops and because of the fact that much of the land was set aside for non-food crops, the peasants did not have enough to eat. Famine, therefore, became a standing feature of the Indian subcontinent. So, if the colonial rule began with the Bengal famine of 1770, it also needed with the Bengal famine of 1943. Many peasants rebelled against such oppressive practices. We will study one such revolt. The trade of indigo from Asia was controlled by the Portuguese in the middle of the 16th century. The Spanish established hundreds of commercial indigo establishments in their colonies in North America. In 17th and 18th centuries, Central American indigo became a very successful product. In their Caribbean and North American colonies, the French and the British set up successful indigo industries. The Dutch set up their indigo industries in Java. In the beginning of the 19th century, the Central American indigo trade collapsed. Because of a war between England and Spain, after the American Revolution, the British lost their control over North American indigo. Thus, there was a crisis in the global indigo market. Bengal was one of the surviving regions. Unhindered by this sharp drop in global indigo production and trade. As labor was cheap in Bengal, indigo could be produced in large quantities. The EEIC began to look for ways to expand the area under indigo cultivation. The prospects of huge profits led many officials of the company to invest in indigo cultivation. The niche system. In the beginning, the planters adopted the niche system of cultivation, where the planters produced indigo on lands that they directly controlled. But soon they faced a number of problems. Large areas of fertile lands for indigo cultivation were not available because the lands were already densely populated, and eviction of the tenants led to conflicts. Secondly, they could not even hire labor to work on indigo plantation, as the peasants were busy on their fields with their rice cultivation. Thirdly, for the same reasons, it was difficult to arrange for plows and bullocks, as the peasants required these to work on their own fields. Thus, the planters failed to bring large areas of land under indigo cultivation. The failure of the niche method led to its replacement by another method, which came to be known as the riot method. Riot method of cultivation. Under the riot method, a contract was signed between the riot or the village headman and the planters. The riots were given loans and forced to grow only indigo on at least 25% of the area under their holding. Later, the planters informed the peasants that loans could be repaid only by supplying indigo to them at fixed rates. Soon, this system also resulted in a number of problems like peasants growing indigo on their fields got a very low price for the product, so they were not able to pay back the loan, which led them into the clutches of moneylenders. Large-scale oppressive measures were used, such as holding the cultivator and his family prisoners, burning his house, etc. This inhuman oppression of indigo cultivators forced them to revolt against the British. After growing indigo, the same land could not be sown again with rice, as the deep roots of indigo had already exhausted the fertility of the soil. The indigo planters advanced small sums of money to the peasants and forced them to enter into contracts to cultivate indigo in a part of their land. The planters also took resource to coercion by heating up, kidnapping, confining, burning, and looting. Most of them maintained armed goons called lathials and were supported by the local police and favored by local magistrates. The Indigo Revolt. In 1859, riots in Bengal refused to grow indigo and refused to pay rents to the planters. At some places, they even attacked indigo factories and socially boycotted those peasants who worked for the planters. Riots decided not to take any advances from the planters to sow indigo. In many villages, headmen who had been forced to sign indigo contracts mobilized the indigo peasants and fought against the indigo planters. Even zamindars went around the villages urging the riots to resist the planters. In September 1860, the peasants refused to grow indigo under duress. The revolt started from a small village in Bengal, Govindapur, in Nadia district, and the leadership was provided by Digambar and Bishambar Biswas, ex-employees of the planters. They gave up indigo cultivation, and when the planters sent lathials to attack their village, they fought back with the help of villagers. The indigo uprising soon spread to all parts of Bengal. The peasants even filed cases against the planters. They also boycotted other peasants who were still cultivating indigo. Ultimately, the planters could not withstand the collective might of the peasants and began shutting down factories. Indigo plantation at this time gradually moved to Bihar, where as late as 1917, Mahatma Gandhi took up the cause of the indigo cultivators against the local planters in Champaran.